Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. Tonight, we are discussing the conclusion of The Hidden Cost of Being African American, How Wealth Perpetuates Inequality by Thomas Shapiro. So tonight, I have with me my brother Everett, brother Tiwolo. He texted me maybe about 30 or 40 minutes ago, and he said he was feeling under the weather, but I know that if he could be here, he would be here. So without further ado, you know that I'm your sister, Dr. R.E.A.D, and I am the host. I will be hosting this discussion, and I'm going to pass the mic to my brother Everett, so that he can introduce himself to the listening audience.
Peace and blessings, brother Everett, Real Truth and Power Live podcast, and UNIA Secretary and Treasurer of the Baltimore Division 106 Barking Club.
Beautiful. And brother, I see you have your shirt. You have the shirt. So
That's
family,
right.
Yeah, make sure that you get your Read Book Club shirt. Regain, elevate, aspire, and be determined, right? Determined. So make sure you grab your Read Book Club shirt. And matter of fact, I always put it at the end, but let me throw Harvey's information up here. So you can visit or email harvey.lewis@gmail.com. Okay, so here's his email address if you want to get a Read Book Club t-shirt, or you can holler at him on IG. His IG handle is Haki_customs with a Z. All right, so that's for folks who have IG. And I hope some folks, I'm waiting for folks to come on in. They may be at cookouts, brother Everett. It's Labor Day weekend.
I know.
So some folks might be like, man, I'm not fooling with Dr. Ma'at today. I ain't fooling with brother Everett today. I'm going to a cookout. But it's raining in Baltimore.
Yeah.
It's raining in Baltimore. So we don't, there's no cookouts happening right now in Baltimore. But yeah, get your Read Book Club shirt from harvey.lewis@gmail.com, or you can contact him via IG at Haki Customs. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Family, if you haven't read the book, if you haven't read the chapter, don't run out, right? Still stay here because we're going to have a dynamic discussion, okay? We always have dynamic discussions. They're very informative discussions. And so tonight, again, we're going to be discussing the conclusion of The Hidden Cost of Being an African American. Don't run out the door. I have Brother Jai's in the building. Peace to you, Brother Jai, and the warrior queen, Crystal Denise. She's in the building. Greetings to you, family. And Melissa, I always butcher your name. Please forgive me. Malicella G. Peace and power to your love. Thank you so much for joining. So this is it. I'm going to announce the new book, the next book tonight. We're going to announce the next book. This is it. Because initially when Brother T said he was sick, I was sharing with Brother Everett that I was going to cancel the discussion or reschedule the discussion. But I said, man, we've been in this book for like 9 weeks, almost 3 months. Almost 3 months. So I said, no. We got to get through this and get to the next book. Peace to you, Sister Chumani Rose. Peace to you, sister. Peace to you. Thank you so much for joining. She said it's raining in Massachusetts too. I wish I could just turn my camera to my window because this is slow dreary out. All right. And so we're going to be discussing the conclusion of this book. I usually, Brother Everett, defer to one of the brothers, but I think I want to start it off. I want to start it off today. So the name of the chapter or the conclusion is called Assets for Equality. And so what Shapiro is doing in the conclusion is he is proposing several asset building policies. And so one of the things are, and I don't know if you want to skip the first page or if it was something on the first page, but I was going to jump right into the policies, Brother Everett.
You can do that. I do like what he said on the first page. I marked that he suggested initiatives and principles aimed at restoring ideals of equality. And he says the American dream and democracy is what he calls assets for equality. So as you go into the policies, that's where he's getting a lot of that from.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on page 184, he proposes the first asset building policy called a children's savings account. And so what he's saying is that, he says that such an initial government or private contribution at birth matches of family contributions for low-income families throughout the child's formative years, and limited use of the account balances at the age of 18 or older. So what he's basically saying is that when a child is born, he's proposing that every child has a savings account at birth, and that the government puts in money, the family will put in, the family will, make some contributions. The government will match those contributions. And this is during the child's formative years, right? And is limited use of the balances, it says, at the age of 18. Now, he says that after high school, account holders could use funds for higher education or training at the age of 25 or older. Uses of the funds might also include small business capitalization and first-time home purchase. If accounts are still active by retirement age, people could use them to cover retirement expenses or pass them on to the next generation. All right. And so what are your thoughts, Brother Everett, on that?
It's a great idea. He was also talking about 12-year-old Derek Tesla, and basically how he was poor in South Central Los Angeles with his grandmother, and how like this could really help him as he got older. So I love the idea, but like we were saying before the show started, the idea and white supremacy doesn't really match, because why would they do that? That's a phenomenal program that he's stating, but why would they do that and give us an advantage to start catching them? So as we go through, a lot of these policies that he's saying are phenomenal, but there's a reason why they're not in place, but this is something that maybe we need to start just incorporating as far as our community, figuring out some of the policies that he's instilling.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking, Brother Everett. Like, we shouldn't even, like you said, it sounds great if the government, right, implemented this policy, but maybe we need to start thinking, like you say, for us as a community. Say when a child is born, instead of being at the baby shower with a box of damn Pampers,
that's right,
and a damn jar of food, maybe we should say, hey, we're going to pull together some money and we're going to start a savings account for this child, or we're going to purchase some mutual funds or bonds, right, or something for this child.
That's
right. I mean, the Pampers and the little Gerber food is nice, right? The little baby clothes is cute. But at the end of the day, when that child is 18, they can't use that Gerber food that you brought to the baby shower. So like you said, even if they don't institute it on a government level, maybe that's something we need to do within our own community. So I couldn't agree with you more. So then he moves on to discussing another asset building policy called an individual development accounts. So he says individual development accounts reward savings by asset poor families who aim to buy their first home, acquire post-secondary education, or start a small business. For every dollar a family saves, matching funds that typically come from a variety of private and public sources provide strong incentives. IDAs, which is short for individual development accounts, are usually managed by community-based organizations with accounts held at a financial institution. Right. So then at the bottom, he says this, and I have a note here. He says, confusing many economists and others who claim that poor people could not save because of their circumstances or values. The demonstration program provides compelling empirical evidence of poor families sacrificing to put money aside to create better lives for themselves. So I love how Shapiro's basically saying that a lot of economists will say, well, these people wouldn't be able to do something like that. Look at their circumstances, look at their values. Mm-hmm. But Shapiro is telling us right here that they have empirical evidence of poor families actually sacrificing to put money aside. Go ahead. Did you want to add something, brother?
No, I was going to continue on. I didn't know if you had anything else to say, but on the next page, 187, he's talking about the IDA and the tax credit and how it will provide financial institutions with a dollar for dollar tax credit for every dollar they contribute as matching funds, up to $500 per IDA per year. The credit will substantially expand the amount of matching funds available for IDA and, pretty much cement asset building. And then he also talks about this proposed legislation will fund about 300,000 accounts. So he does the research, He has a lot of information on not only what it can do, how federal financial institutions can help and benefit. So he has a good plan there, but it always trickles down to me is by being one of the minorities, why won't they do that? And it's because they have the upper hand. So great plan, great process, and great way to implement how it could work. But there's a reason why they're not, implementing this great plan.
Absolutely. And I just want to acknowledge a beautiful mind. Peace and love to you, beloved. I see that you're in the building. Sister Crystal said, my dad actually established savings accounts for his 5 grandchildren that he and my sister and I contribute to. Ashe. They had to graduate from high school to obtain the funds. It made a big difference. See, and this is what we need to be doing. My son, I went and got him a savings account when he was 6. And so just so he could have it. And the goal is to at least have about $20,000 in there by the time he's 18. He's 11 now. But and I also bought him some stocks. But I love what her dad did, for his 5 grandchildren. And so see, Brother Everett, this is the type of stuff we need to be doing.
That's right.
Period. Open, and it doesn't cost, open it up. And I think some banks you had to put in $100 or something when you first open it, but open it up, put it there, and then have the parents, put money aside in the account. And this is how we need to be doing. And she puts a note right here. She said that he was not wealthy. It was from his hard work and sweat.
That's right.
Oh my God. Let me get this troll out of here. It's always a troll. Big mad. He's a whole troll. He talking about Africa. We're not even having a conversation about Africa. Always a daggone troll. So let me get him up out of here. All right. So moving on. The next asset building policy that Shapiro mentions is the down payment accounts. And so I love this idea. He was saying, and I hope that I didn't miss anything. He said, well, he starts off by giving us a stat. He says that home equity accounts for 60% of the total wealth of America's middle class. So riddle be that. So if you don't own a house, think about that. You're really behind at this point. If you're not owning, right? Because it's saying that home equity accounts for 60% of the total wealth of America's middle class. So he said the chief purpose of down payment accounts is to allow families to acquire assets for down payment and closing costs. So he said, how would it work? It says similar to the home mortgage interest deduction, renters, and I like this, renters could deduct a portion of their rent on their tax form and have it put aside in a dedicated account to match their own savings for home ownership on a one-to-one basis. This money would be used for first-time home buyers. Now, I rented literally for 6 years, Brother Everett. Wow. Can you imagine if a percentage of that, right, was set aside all of those years that I've rented, 6, 7 years. Some people rent for 10, 15, 20 years. Can you imagine if a percentage of that was set aside for a down payment on a home, how that would increase home ownership in our community?
That's very powerful because you have a lot of people that, especially young couples and young families, that they rent, they can't afford it, they're working, and as they start, paying rent, they're making more babies, families are growing, and they kind of get stuck in that situation where they have to rent. And you're trying to save and everything, but to pay your rent and have that go towards a house, another powerful, phenomenal idea. Like you said, imagine how a lot of these young couples, you think you're 25, 26, like you said, you were renting for 6, 7 years. Imagine that. They're 30, 31, but they can't move, but they've been paying rent, and they can use some of that rent asset money to put a down payment on a home. It's a powerful idea. Powerful.
Absolutely. I think it was phenomenal. And so then he goes on to the next section. He says, why assets? Why assets? And I love how he talked about the welfare system. But the stuff that he said, to be honest with you, Brother Everett, we already knew.
Right.
Like we knew that welfare was not created to lift families out of poverty. It wasn't. We already knew that. We already knew that. He says that our record, talking about the U.S., of helping lift families out of poverty to better lives is shameful as measured in absolute terms or compared to other advanced democracies. In the United States, Current government policies reduce poverty by about 38%. In stark contrast, among other Western industrialized countries, government social policies reduce poverty by an average of 79%. And so we already know that. I mean, like, I'm not that I knew that stat, right?
Right.
But I'm just saying we know that the U.S. isn't interested in lifting American families out of poverty. They're not. The U.S. is about profit over people. That's what the U.S. is about. Profit over people. They don't care about your health. They don't care about you. They don't care about you, period. They're trying to profit. And that's what America is all about. That's what America is all about. Mm-hmm.
That stat is a little alarming, though. When you say it reduces poverty about 38%, in stark contrast, among other Western countries, it's 79%. So that lets you know over here in America, they want to keep you down because, you would think a flourishing economy, everybody benefits. You know how we always say we all going to eat. Everybody eats where we from. We all going to eat. We try, but no, they're not trying to do that governmental wise in America. They don't want. If you're down, they want to keep you down so they can keep keep everything in their favor.
They want to keep you down because they don't want you competing for wealth and resources and power. So that nobody remember Dr. Claude Anderson, I think he did a beautiful job driving that point home, that he said racism is a race for the wealth and the resources and power. That's what it's about. So we want to keep you down because we don't want anybody to compete with us, right? Fact. We don't want anybody to compete with us for power, wealth, and resources. So that's what it's really about. And so I like at the top of page 90 was the second paragraph where actually it's really the first paragraph where he talks about the Homestead Act, right? And how that one policy, look at what he says here. And I'm not even going to read the whole thing. He said that one policy, he said that means that one policy led to a legacy of property ownership, upward mobility, economic stability, class status, and wealth, right? For mainly whites. He said 46 million adults today. 46 million adults today have benefited off of the Homestead Act, which excluded African American people. It excluded African American people. And so for those who aren't familiar with the Homestead Act, it was an act, it began or was introduced in 1862, and it provided up to 160 acres of land. It says land, self-reliance, and ultimately wealth to millions of American families. And this act excluded African American people. He also talks about the Federal Housing Administration. He's saying that was another entity, it says, which changed the rules under which Americans buy homes, provided structural stability for America's middle class, and created inheritable wealth, and also the GI Bill and the Veteran Administration. Okay, so he was talking about all of these different policies that basically put whites in the position. And then he goes on to say at the bottom that they did this for over 150 years. But I would beg a difference. Dr. Amos Wilson tells us in Blueprint for Black Power that it was over 300 years that white folks created policies. That's why that whole thing about lifting yourself up by the bootstraps and all of that is a crock of BS.
That's right.
Because Dr. Amos Wilson said from 1675 to 1975, 300 years, they created policies that gave people who were labeled white a one-up on people who were labeled non-white. So, Shapiro tells us that, it happened well over 150 years. Dr. Amos Wilson has the data in Blueprint for Black Power to show that it happened over a course of 300 years.
Dr. Ma'at, that when you first started off with the Homestead Act, this was something that really just kind of broke me down. Because he mentioned a stat, 1.5 million families titled to 246 million acres of land, nearly the size of California and Texas combined. You got to think of that right now and think that didn't include Black people. So look at all of that land. Texas and California are the biggest states. Am I correct? Texas, maybe Florida and New York, maybe, but
but they are California.
In Texas, you're talking about a lot of land. No Black people were entitled to that. And then when he was talking about I think like you had touched up on it to his point of over 150 years. You were saying Dr. Amos said 300. I highlighted that. And he makes a point that make sure he says the poor and disadvantaged, especially African Americans, were not allowed to have this policy to acquire land, property, homes, and wealth. Instead, we're stuck with welfare policies. He puts that right in the book. So instead of us being able to get into these programs, they were giving us welfare instead. So, that's just crazy.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And then at the bottom, he mentions asset accounts like 401k, 403b, IRAs, Roth IRAs, and the Federal Thrift Savings Plan. He said those are the most rapidly growing form of assets policy. So he does plug those. And I remember when I was a youngster, and my aunt used to say, I got my 401k, or I'm going to borrow from my 401k. I didn't know what she was talking about, but then she had explained to me that, she puts in, some money, the company matches it. And so he's calling that, in a form of asset set policy. And so then on page 191, he goes on to say that it would be African-American families, because we possess fewer financial resources than whites, the asset policies that he is proposing will have a greater impact on our community, right? It says, but they will positively include millions of white families and thus address the sedimentation of both race and class inequality. What are your thoughts about that, Brother Everett? Because mine's were, how we were pressing the Democrats for tangibles, right? During the 2020 presidential election, Black folks said, I want a policy that benefits me specifically or exclusively.
Right.
And, the Democrats, they were like, I don't know about doing that, but we can do some other things. Like I remember Kamala Harris. Oh, goodness, that girl, she double talks a whole lot. But right. but Kamala was, when she was initially asked whether she would do something, exclusively for Black people, she said, oh, no. But she did mention that there were other policies that they wanted to implement that she said would directly impact Black families because of our economic condition. So what are your thoughts about Shapiro? Him proposing these different asset building policies for everybody, but not really talking about, well, he's proposing it for everybody, but it's not exclusive to Black folks. I don't know if I even articulated that question clearly. So what are your thoughts? So he's saying, let's do this for everybody. Do you think we should be focusing on everybody? Or do you think it should be some policies that should be made specifically or exclusively for Black people?
You said a lot, but I'm with you. First thing is talking about Kamala Harris. I did hear her say that. She said, oh, no, I'm not going to do anything specifically for Black people. I'm going to put in policies that will affect all people. And I think about the saying quid pro quo. So in that saying, it's I believe it's Latin or something, but pretty much when I vote for you, you need to return the favor for me. This is what politicians are supposed to do. So when I vote for Barack Obama or Kamala Harris, I'm expecting them to do something particularly for me and my community. That's what white politicians do. When the Jewish community get together and they say, hey, we're going to support this candidate, 9 out of 10 times that candidate knows he needs to go back and do something for that community. And they have a list of demands on the table and they meet with those candidates. So hopefully that covered that part. We need to start demanding something specifically for us. But when it comes to the policies, we're never going to benefit totally from these policies. For example, the Minority Business Act, minority business policies where you apply for minority business accounts. But now we find out, especially in Maryland, that the majority of the minority business accounts go to white women. You know what I'm saying? And now Hispanics are starting to get a lot of that. So we're not benefiting from policies that are for everybody because everybody gets a piece of the pie. It's hard to benefit from policies that are for everybody when you're at the very bottom. Right. You mentioned Dr. Claude Anderson. He talks about that all the time. It always rings in when he talks about race. And people think of race as a color, but he says race is a movement. It's like an actual track meet, what I'm saying, for economic power. And how can we get a little bit of economic power when you're only giving us a little bit to share, and we're so far down. You know what I'm saying? So we need policies specifically for us that we can benefit for our community to catch up. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. It did. And I wanted to make sure we're on the same page all the way. I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about that. Yeah, we need policies that are specific to us, that are exclusive, to us, in order to redress what has happened to us, right? The poor whites didn't experience what we experienced. They didn't, and the other minorities that are coming over here, they didn't experience what we experienced. So I absolutely feel that policies need to be created and implemented that will redress the atrocities that were committed against Black people in America. And look, Sister Crystal said, we know that. And A Beautiful Mind said, yes, it should be that way. They should do something for us when we vote for them.
That's right.
All right. So my cousin Megan, she's in the building. Peace to you, love. She says, why do politicians get so angry when Blacks ask for specific legislation, but all other parties have specific legislation?
That's right.
Exactly. But when we ask for it, it's like, how dare you? Like, how dare you ask me for something specific? But everybody else can do it. LGBTQ can get legislation passed for what they want. The Hispanics can get things passed.
That's right.
Whites get things passed. Look at how quick the Asian anti.
Yeah, that was crazy.
It went just like this.
Just like that. I mean, yeah, too fast.
But you got Trayvon Martin family still fighting. Tamir Rice family still fighting. Sandra Bland's family still fighting. Who else? I mean, it's a whole litany of Black folks still fighting. But they passed the I think it's called anti-hate, anti-Asian hate, whatever it was. They passed it like this. But when we ask for something, it's like, how dare you ask us for anything, right?
You know what? It reminds me of the book that we just read before this one, The Creation of Whiteness.
Birth of a Nation.
The birth of a white nation.
Yes, birth of a white nation.
When you get into that book, you realize that most of the policies in government were created to keep Black people down. So now you're asking for policies for Black people. There's a reason why, the policies are to keep us down. So, when we vote for our politicians and we ask for things for our politicians, they know that, they have a tough fight if they want to put something in place for Black people. So we don't really have a candidate that's a straight up real brother. I hate to say that way, that'll come in and be like, you know what, I'm pro-Black. Yeah, I'm about to fix up, in Baltimore, Emerson Village or Boarded Homes, or I'm going to Chicago and I'm going to fix things up. As soon as they become president, it's for everybody or all people, like Barack Obama or like Kamala Harris is saying now. So we don't have anybody that can be a politician to do that. So we're going to have to figure out our own ways to maneuver and do things. And again, that's why we say race first. We got to just start supporting each other's movements, supporting each other financially, and building up something in our community cultural wise so we can get the advantage another way.
No, absolutely. And Sister Crystal, she said permanent underclass. That's what Dr. Claude Anderson talks about a lot. He was like, Black folks, I done met him a few times and he was like, we need to wake up and start making better choices and doing things. Cause he said, if not, we're going to end up being a permanent underclass here.
That's right.
So anyway, at the bottom of page 191, he says he mentions the concept of a stakeholder society, one in which the individual can have a stake or feel invested in all aspects of society, whether financial or not. So he's saying with these asset building policies, we will become stakeholders in this society because now we own assets, right? So for people that don't have assets, like think about, our communities, some brothers like in the projects, you go down there, they don't care. They pissing in elevators, they throwing trash on but they feel like they don't own it. It's like, it ain't mine. It's the government's, even though I don't condone living like that at all. Right. I don't condone that. But when people don't own things, they don't take care of them. A lot of folks don't. Now, when I was renting, I made sure that I kept, my area up. I made sure that my family, but some people don't operate like that. Some people, they like, hey, I don't own it. And so they destroy it. They don't take care of it. They don't. But, so I do understand what he's saying, that if people started owning assets or possessing assets, that would make people feel like stakeholders in this society.
Yeah, that's a very important, because you feel more empowered when you have a piece of something. Even if you don't own anything, like, just imagine just looking around now. And I remember, and it kind of was ending in the 80s, but when I was younger, you had black people owning corner stores where you could relate and see them see a black business owner firsthand, and
Absolutely.
thriving, and you wanted to look out for a store and stuff like that, and it was right there in the community. But when you have bad school systems, and you don't like your school, and your community looks like trash, you kind of don't feel any empowerment whatsoever. Like, it's no chance for you to invest in anything that you don't even feel empowered to do. So that's very powerful to just start getting some kind of stakeholder in our community. Like you said, it make you feel better about your community. You're right.
Absolutely. I laugh at these brothers, not laugh, but because I don't want to sound harsh or insensitive, but when these brothers, man, hey, this is my hood. Brother, you don't own anything anything in here, right?
That's
you don't
right.
own the house, you don't own the businesses, what do you mean this is yours? This is not yours. And then you got people dying over the block. Oh, I'm from so and so, and they dying. And it's like, dude, you all don't own this. This isn't yours. And I remember Dr. Claude Anderson in Powernomics, he said that we have quasi black communities. He said we more or less have black neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. He said, because with the community, you own things. You own it. When you say a black community, that means you own the property, you own the real estate, you own the businesses, you own the school, it's yours. So he said we don't have, he called them quasi black communities. That's what he called them. He said we live in black neighborhoods.
I want to piggyback off of that, because I believe he said it. I believe it was him in Powernomics when he was saying that a community is something, like you said, you have good schools, you take care of your neighbor, they take care of you, you love going to the grocery store, you do a community events, you're all in. A neighborhood is just a place where you lay your head. He said that's just a place where you lay your head. And he said the black community is full of neighborhoods. We don't have communities where we're building together. So I hope that makes sense. But
that makes absolute sense.
Like you said, we repping a hood, but we're not repping a community. He makes a big distinguish there.
Absolutely. Africa the Great. Well, I'm sorry, Megan, my cousin, she said the Democratic Party is trash. I have no idea why we exclusively vote blue. I agree. I'm independent. I'm not. Too. Yeah, I'm independent. I don't. So I vote our best interest. Africa the Great, it says, if we know and understand how we was locked out of everything, why don't we pull our resources together and beat them at their own game? I know, Africa the Great. I know, family. I know. And then A Beautiful Mind says we have to unite. None of these politicians are for us. Facts. All right. And so on page 192, he said another reason for starting an asset building policy is that it directly addresses an emerging new understanding of poverty. If welfare policy only targets those currently below the official poverty line, it focuses on about 1 in 8 Americans, but it neglects the nearly 6 to 10 Americans who will experience at least 1 year of poverty while they are adults. So he says that the economic fragility of those who will experience poverty would be improved vastly by building an asset safety net. So I love that. And then he starts talking about welfare at the bottom. And remember, we kind of already touched on that, how welfare wasn't created to lift families out of poverty. He said they failed to promote independence and self-reliance. They do. A lot of people, once you get on welfare, they never get off. Matter of fact, you have people, Brother Everett, you from Baltimore, so I know you've seen it. They will pass the Section 8 down. So grandma might have had Section 8. She end up dying. Then the children, they stay in the projects right there with grandma, and they keep passing it down. So like he said, they don't promote, independence and self-reliance, at all. And so then at the bottom, he says policy needs to be crafted so that asset and traditional social assistance policies synergize one another rather than cancel them out. So basically, he's saying with these asset building policies that we're not going to just throw away like the social assistance, that we want them all to work hand in hand with one another. So I agree 100% with that. Did you want to add to that, Brother Everett?
No, it makes sense. I mean, the welfare thing is difficult because some people actually really do need welfare and trying to get off of welfare, surviving food stamps, whatever. But, it has to be something in place, like he's trying to say, that works hand in hand to get off of the welfare and be able to get assets as well. So, your next generation can go up a step further. A lot of the things that he's talking about, it doesn't deal with the now, it deals with the future. So he's saying, yes, you're struggling, whatever the case may be, but he's always talking about generational. If you can obtain this asset and get off of welfare, but also obtain an asset, you know what I'm saying? That asset can help your next generation not even be thinking about welfare and help you with schooling and getting in college and using that asset to build more assets and stuff like that. So, sometimes a lot of us think about the now. I'm on welfare. I got to get off welfare. I'm working hard or whatever. But they don't think about the next stage. What about my children? What can I get for my children? So this policy about welfare and getting other programs involved in it to help obtain an asset is crucial if the government would do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brother Africa the Great, I appreciate you. He said I need to post my Cash App so we can grow this platform. I appreciate it, brother. It's like, but you know what? I never even, like some people say, what's your Cash App? And I appreciate when people just, they'll send me a couple of dollars and say, come on, sister, we need to grow this. Because right. they like the fact, Brother Everett, that we're not talking all that foolishness. We talking about assets. We're talking about uniting, building wealth, Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, putting in the work, those are the type of conversations we have on this platform. It's not one of those gossip channels. And there's a lot of gossip channels out there. And I'm telling you, Brother Everett, you'll go and look and you'll see, and just calling out Tasha K, people like that. You go see her. She got 10,000 people, in the chat, or the Cynthia G's. They have a huge following. And, I'm not dissing those women. They do what they do. But, we got to start supporting platforms that's pumping out the real information. I love your platform, brother. You just had on a presidential candidate from which country was it?
Nigeria. He's going to be running in, I believe, 22, Yeah, presidential candidate. Dr. Favor that's running in Nigeria. Exactly.
See, so these are the platforms we need to be, supporting. I just had a cybersecurity expert who runs a $13 million research center come on to talk about how Black people need to get involved in STEM and what we need to be looking forward to with 5G and all of that. And you look at his interview and it's like 300 people viewing it. It's just crazy. It's really crazy to me. But anyway, we'll keep on going. We'll keep on going. So he starts talking about inheritance. And he said that there are two philosophical and political traditions regarding inheritance. The first one is that back in the day, it says it starts with John Locke and Edward Burke and runs through the conservatives, including George W. Bush. And I don't know whether he's talking about junior or senior here, but he said this tradition emphasizes the right to pass down property and generally advocates privileging the tax status of property and wealth. So that's the first thing. You got, the white conservatives, saying, look, I have the right to pass my property and my wealth down. And I want to make sure, that the tax status, that however you tax it, it doesn't, I get a tax break, right? I don't have, an estate tax or a heavy estate tax on that. The other tradition, he says, stems from John Jacques Rousseau and Thomas Paine and runs through the liberal political thought, the New Deal and the Great Society, right? It says that FDR said, I guess that was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, said that the transmission from generation to generation of vast fortunes by will, inheritance, or gift is not consistent with the ideals of the American people. This matter philosophically and politically has never been settled. So you got some white folks, the conservatives, saying, I have the right to pass my wealth down to my children, and and it shouldn't be taxed like that, right? And then you have the liberal folks saying, well, if you perpetuate your wealth, then that's not really being, that's not equality, right, for all people. That's not equity and equality for all people. And so he's saying that this matter has never been settled, but he said that they do come to some sort of compromise. And so then he talks about how inheritance, if you have it, it buys advantages in schools, communities, jobs, businesses, and social networks, right? So he says, standing up for American ideals, I firmly believe means of passing an Opportunity Act that taxes the inheritance of unearned property at, say, a flat 10% rate after reasonable exemption with revenues earmarked for asset building policies. It sounds nice, but I don't think those white folks are going to stand for you to tax their inheritance or their wealth at 10% and then take that and put that in an asset building policy. Because people are selfish, Brother Everett. Like we had to tell the truth. People are selfish, and it's about me and mine. We live in a very, especially Europeans, they are extremely individualistic. Dr. Amos Wilson talks about that. They are extremely individualistic. And so I don't see them saying, well, go ahead and tax my inheritance 10% and take that and put that in a asset building policy for the less fortunate. I don't see that happening because of their individualistic mindset.
And they want to stay ahead. So, I mean, they want to stay ahead. They like that they can have inheritance, and we're not able to do those type of things. So why would they give us a benefit? It's a competition in a lot of ways. They're thinking we're in the good neighborhoods. We already, what's crazy? This book tells us a lot about white people. They don't want to live with us. He's saying that they'll move out. They'll forget. The average family starts off saying, hey, we want to get a better school, so we're going to go live where there's better schools. But if black people in that area, they'll forget about the better school. They'll go live around their own kind first. Things that we're not thinking about. So why would they give up money to help us assist them in moving around them and getting that advantage of having better schools so we can get the better jobs, so we can learn how to own and invest properly? They're not trying to do that. So again, a great idea, but look who we dealing with. It's kind of like, great idea, I love it, but if I brought that to the table, they'll look at me like I'm crazy.
Exactly.
It's nothing we can do about that. Great idea, but that'll never happen.
It'll never happen. In my opinion, it never happened. And so then he moves on to talk about like the estate tax and how people want to repeal the estate tax. And he says proponents of the repeal tell us that children often are forced to sell family farms or businesses just to pay taxes. So basically they're arguing, they're saying, no, we don't want this estate tax because, these people who are inheriting these businesses, farms, whatever property, they might have to end up selling it just to pay bills, right? And so Thomas Shapiro lays that to rest. He says the reality is that only 2% of Americans leave large enough estates, over 1 million under current provisions, to fall within this tax. So he's saying, like, some of you we don't even look at this 2%, right? 2% of the Americans leave a large enough estate. And he says, only if your estate, he goes on to say, only if your estate is worth 17 million or more do you fit the profile of an estate taxpayer, And so he talks about that, that thought, and people going back and forth about whether to repeal it or whether to institute it. And so what are your thoughts on that? Having an estate tax where they tax people estate.
Again, I love the idea if I could benefit from it. He's talking about, I don't know, he said in 1916, but all the way in 1916, with the federal revenues exempting, the first was 50,000. It went up to like 120 in 1976, 225. 1986, 600, and he believes in 2009 it would have been phasing up to 3.5 million. So it's money there. great way to benefit from it. But, great plan, great idea, but the press is not going to let that happen. It's like we got to find a way to implement. We need to really look at this book and figure out ways to implement some of these policies or create policies like it, but maybe not government wise. Maybe businesses, Black-owned businesses, try to do something. I don't know. Again, it's great plans, but I just don't see the government allowing this to happen. It's this never can happen.
Yeah, the wealthy is not going to let you tax them. The wealthy is not going to let it happen. Mm-mm. The wealthy, that's who controls the politicians.
That's right.
They're not going to let that happen. So he talks about that, and then he says that an economist, Edward Wolf, had proposed a wealth tax as a means of alleviating inequality and raising revenue. And it says, as a way of rectifying the awesome concentration of wealth in America since the 1970s, no doubt such a tax would send a powerful democratic message, right? And so again, it sounds nice. And Sister Crystal, she said, I was like BS when I read it. Same here, sis. Mm-hmm. It's like, it sounds nice. But I guess I'm like, are we just being pessimist or realist, Brother Everett? I think we're being realist.
We are.
But we sound pessimistic though, don't we?
We are. We've been talking about Dr. Claude Anderson today, so I'm also keep that up. I heard him talking one time, and he went up and he was saying how he brought the Powernomics plan to some politicians, and white politicians came to him and was like, man, this is a great plan. You got the reparations part, the finances and everything together. And he said he was looking at him, waiting for the but. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's always a but with these policies, but we can't do that. He's like, it's a great plan. They're saying do it, but why won't you implement it if it's so great?
Right. If it's so great.
So, like you say, nobody's going to help us. They're not going to give us any benefit to help us. In fact, half of these laws in government are put in place to oppress us. And we just got to realize that, you know what I mean, and overcome it in another way, because we're not going to get any help. Not our Black politicians won't even do it.
No, they're not. They're I remember Dr. Kaba Kamene. He said, know the difference between powerful people and people in powerful positions.
That's right.
And so you might see a Black face in a powerful position, but that black face is not a powerful person. And that's just the reality. All right. So then he moves on to talk about home mortgage interest deduction and how they can, at the end of the tax season, tax form, we use the, they get a kickback. Mm-hmm. You can write off your home mortgage interest, on your taxes. And so he's saying that this actually benefits the wealthy more than us, right? Because their homes cost more, right?
Exactly.
Their homes cost more. Their homes are appreciating faster than ours. And so he says that the single most important housing policy is the home mortgage interest deduction, because it lowers taxes in proportion to a family's tax rate. The majority of this $55 billion subsidy goes to the highest income families. 1/3 of it goes to families in the top 10%. So he says, I like the idea that instead of rewarding taxpayers who pay higher marginal tax rates, converts the interest one can deduct into a flat percentage. He says all families could take 25% of mortgage interest off their taxes, regardless of earnings, or whether they choose the standard deduction or itemized tax schedule. Again, it sounds great. I mean, it sounds great. I doubt if it'll be implemented, but it sounds great.
Phenomenal plan, but it's not going to happen. I know. So, the funny thing is, I mean, all these ideas are just great. That's all I can say. Sounds great, but we gotta be realistic. Like, they're not gonna. They want to keep us where we're at. It's just it's sad. But it's a reality.
It's a reality. Absolutely. And then he goes on to talk about the 2003 Bush tax cut package. And anyone that followed that administration knows that Bush was for the rich. Mm-hmm. George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr., they were for the rich. So their tax cut package benefited the wealthy. So we can actually move on because it's like a paragraph talking about that. And I don't even want to spend time talking about George Bush. So moving on to home ownership discrimination. He's talking about mortgage discrimination against African Americans is a major reason for residential segregation. And he said it remains persistently high. And he said a large part of the solution is an enforcement agenda. So what he's asking is that the Department of Justice and the Department of Housing and Urban Development be given adequate staff and resources to completely review and analyze mortgage applications, right? Because he says weak or ineffective enforcement negates law. And we already know that as Black people. We already know that. Because remember when the federal troops were down there during the Reconstruction period, we were building, we were flourishing, we were doing certain things, but then the federal government yanked the troops out, remember? And that's when Jim Crow set in. So we already know firsthand that weak and ineffective enforcement negates the law. I remember Dr. Amos Wilson in his book, The Falsification of African Consciousness, he said that a law is only as good as the people who enforce it.
That's right.
So, you know, we can have all the laws on the books. Like, look at the Voters' Right. Look at the Voters Act of 1964. That was on the books, right? But we already had the right to vote. You know, once we got out of slavery, I think we got it during the Reconstruction era that we had the right to vote. Well, actually, it was Black men who had the right to vote during the Reconstruction era. I think it was passed around that time. So the right to vote wasn't the right for Black folks, or actually Black men to vote, wasn't new, right? It wasn't anything new. But then remember, they put it back on the books in 1964. But why we got to keep putting the laws back on the books? I mean, you get what I'm saying? So laws are only as good as those who enforce it. So he's asking for, you know, the Department of Justice, the Department of Housing and Urban Development to review and analyze mortgage applications. I'm gonna say this again. I know we've been saying it. It sounds good.
That's right.
But I do doubt if they do it. And so he talks about how mortgage lenders and insurance redliners should be held accountable for the racially specific damages they have imposed on communities of color. You know, and I agree. No one has paid reparations for that. You know how many Black people lost their homes? They got scammed. You know, we got impacted by redlining. No one has never been accountable for what they have done to Black people. No one.
You know, this part was very important because throughout the whole book, he's talking about assets, obtaining different assets. And he says the number one asset that people should get that can help benefit for generational wealth is a home. And he mentions here that mortgage discrimination against African Americans is the major reason residential segregation remains persistently high. Fair housing laws do not allow judges immediate remedies or means to push perpetrators. The onus is on individuals and community organizations to do the expensive and time-consuming work of law enforcement because people in office have little interest or intention of enforcing fair lending and fair housing laws. A large part of the solution is an enforcement agenda. So he's pretty much saying, you know, the housing discrimination is really holding Black people back. And, you know, unless we figure out how to do something community-wise to fight it, then that's not going to change. So I think that part was very important, how he's pushing assets, Black African Americans not having assets, and the discrimination factor being a main part of it. You know, we always want to sit back. Well, people always want to sit back, other cultures, and say they cry all the time. You know, they always saying it's unfair. It's unfair. But he's saying here, it's true. It is unfair. And this unfairness is really holding us back. And we have to really be mindful of that. This book, one thing that you always saying, Dr. Mott, that this book is really bringing us out is that we have that mindset. We got to work hard. We got to do this. We got to do that. This is the American dream. You can overcome it. This book is really saying that's not true. No matter how hard Black people work, they're going to come upon discrimination, laws, and rules to hold us down. And
the game is rigged.
The
game is rigged.
Really showing it. That's right.
Yeah, it's rigged. It's rigged. The game is rigged. You know, the game, we're playing in a rigged game. We coming in, we want to play fair. And the game is already rigged.
That's right.
They already know the winners. And I'm getting that from Dr. Claude Anderson. He said the game is rigged. They already selected the winners. So we coming in there. All we got to do is play by the rules. Play by the rules. So we going in there playing by the rules. Claude Anderson said, "Man, they already rigged the game. They already designated the winners."
That's right.
That's what we're contending with. So then he moves into educational equity,
Mm.
and he talks about how basically the quality of education depends on the wealth and resources of the community in which it resides, right? And so he's saying that there's a market for quality schooling. A market for quality schooling is created where financial resources buy opportunities. So if I live in a community that is wealthy, right, and has resources, then the school that's in the community will have resources, right? And will provide a high quality education to the children who live in that community. And he's saying, look, it's unfair. It's unfair that people have to lie about where they live to get a quality education. It's sad that people have to move out of their neighborhoods to get a quality education, or stay in their neighborhoods and pay for private school because they don't like the schools that are in their neighborhood. And he mentions a black couple in this particular section, and he was saying it was a black couple. They wanted to stay in a black I'm looking at it right now. Who was it? Yep, the Andrews. He said that they wanted to stay in a black neighborhood, but they didn't like the schools, right? And so what they ended up having to do is pay for private school for their children. And he said that this is another kind of segregation tax many middle class black families pay. And I didn't think about that, because usually the segregation tax that I always think about is the fact that if I'm living in a black neighborhood and I have a house, if you take that house and you put that same exact house in a white neighborhood, it's worth more.
That's crazy.
So they said that black people literally have lost billions of dollars because we want to live around each other. So another form of the segregation tax is, okay, if we want to stay in our own community, the schools are trashy. So now I may have to pull the equity out of my house or take money out of my income to pay for my children to go to private school because, the schools are bad, And so he said that that's another form of segregation tax. So he's saying that right here, he says public policy should work towards equity of condition in school communities. So he said, clearly, this means a renewed commitment to equity-based educational reform. The way to leave no child behind in this approach is to ensure high-level equity in educational conditions, to take the school advantage of moving to wealthier communities. So he goes on to say, I think that was about it, right? That we should have a public policy that promotes or creates equity-based educational reform. So that's what we need to focus on. Yep. And he's saying right here, I'm at the bottom. He says local property taxes fund the leading portion of school finances, 45 to 50%. Therefore, it's easy to understand how the wealth of a community, its resource base, governs educational resources and the opportunities that go with them. The federal share is actually only about 5 to 10%, with the state contributing the remaining 45 to 50%. So he says the disadvantage of low resource communities and the advantage of high resource communities can be addressed by shifting local school financing to the state and federal levels. So instead of taking it out of the local property taxes, he's saying just shift it to the federal and state levels to ensure that we have equity in education. So he talks about that. Did you want to chime in, brother?
No, I was just it's just crazy because like you were saying if I have a house and I could buy the same house, the exact same features in the white neighborhood, it'd be a lot more. So that's the first problem, and then my community schools are really messed up, and I want to stay around my people and live with my people, but I got to pay for private school. So I'm already struggling right now, and now I got to pay for private school so my kids can get a proper education. We're not talking about college. We're just talking about school. And they have the benefit of going to public school if they choose, because the schools in white communities, public schools, aren't that bad. And they can still pay for private schools because they have a better asset, which is probably the same home I had, but worth a lot more because of the community it's in. All I can think of is what you said, the game is rigged. Like it's really rigged and it's crazy. We're trying to do all the right things, but we're at a disadvantage and we just got to try to find a way out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so he ends this conclusion with the challenge for middle class America. And literally, Brother Everett, I wrote dreaming. I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see. Where is it? Right here. Right. I wrote dreaming in the margin because he says this. And family, just bear with me. I have to read this. He says, part of the big picture I have been describing is how communities, families, and individuals try to trap resources and hoard them for their own benefit. Because individuals believe they can personally benefit from it, and because they do not trust government to act in the civic interests, they attempt to buy their way out of social problems on a one at a time basis. This encourages a privatized notion of citizenship at the expense of solutions that work for all. It creates artificial demand and artificial sources of profit, such as when people pay larger amounts for suburban homes, private schools, gated communities, car alarms, home security systems, and private police services because they feel threatened by city life. A far more cost-effective system and far more democratic approach is to build an infrastructure that would help everyone. I put dreaming. Mm-hmm. No one is going to, these white middle-class families are not interested in building an infrastructure that would help everyone. And so he says the challenge for the middle class is to support policies. Listen to this. He's asking the middle class to support policies that extend similar mobility opportunities to less fortunate families and do not saw off the mobility ladder behind themselves. If government policies and Head Start assets are key reasons behind the success of middle-class Americans, then we need to recognize that most middle-class families, particularly white families, do not achieve that status on their own. It is time to extend those opportunities to all. It sounds like a nice dream.
That's right.
He's asking white middle-class families who are very individualistic to say, oh no, I want to help everybody. I'm going to extend this upward mobility ladder to everyone. Black, Chinese, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. No, that's not happening. He says, and the second tough challenge for middle-class America is to participate in rebuilding a civic infrastructure for the common good. Yeah. So I read it and I can't wait. I'm gonna reach out to Mr. Shapiro. I'm gonna reach out to him and ask him to come on maybe next week to have a bill with us, because I just want to talk to him about these ideas, because these ideas are great. But it's kind of like, do you know where we are? It's like no one cares about the minorities. They don't care about
that would be a question I'd like to ask him. Like, I would love for you to ask him, like, hey, these are some great plans, but there's a reason why they're not going on. Would you like to elaborate on why these policies won't get passed? I'd like to see his mindset by saying it. Does he have an excuse for it? Does he say because people aren't pushing the ideas, or does he say, well, they're great ideas, but it's racism? And I got to admit that. I wonder if he's going to just go.
I wonder if he's going to admit it. Yeah, just admit it. Just admit it, that it's not happening because of racism. Right. And Africa the Great said, and we can't afford to be dreaming with them. Right.
That's right.
Right. It's a dream. And like he said, we can't afford to be dreaming with them. Absolutely. Absolutely. So then he goes on at the bottom. He says, it is a measure of our times and how far we have strayed from American ideals, that awarding achievement in merit, not birth, sounds radical. Policies should simultaneously begin to build asset ladders out of poverty, reward achievement while narrowing inequality, and uphold rights to fair opportunity over the privilege of wealthy dead people to permanently advantage their children by giving them property. When I read this, I thought to myself, isn't this what America was built on? Mm-hmm. Wasn't it built on white wealthy men being able to manage and hold on to their property and pass their
Mhm.
property down. So when he started talking about the American ideals, I guess liberty and justice for all, right? Or equality and equity. Um, I gotta keep on remembering that this is a white male, right? A white male perspective. And so what do you mean by the American ideals? Because America, and you remember, we just read the book, Birth of a White Nation. It wasn't intended. These ideals were not intended to be applied to Black folks, Africans in America. So when he talked about how, American ideals, and we should build asset ladders out of poverty and reward achievement and narrow inequality and uphold rights and fair opportunity over privilege of wealthy dead people. Isn't this what America was built on? Look at who wrote the Constitution. Well, look who wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Right. These were wealthy, property holding white men. I mean, you get what I'm saying? So it's like,
he's delusional a little bit. It's like he's admitting the policies and the racism and stuff like that. But he's also acting like we can just go ahead and say, hey, we found that the mistakes in these policies and let's create new ones or change them. He's not acknowledging that white supremacy won't allow that. He's not looking at the fact that, I guess if I was white, I'd be saying the same thing. Why would I pay to uplift somebody to catch me? Why would I do that? You know what I'm saying? They have that mentality to take care of their own and keep themselves in power. He's not acknowledging that part. Either he's naive to it or he just has some great ideas. But, you hit it on the button. I don't think he's realizing why this country was formed, how it was formed, and who was formed to, uplift, and who was formed to keep down.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And he ends on page 204. He says, a just society would not wish racial legacies and inheritance to block opportunities and make a mockery of merit, and just individuals will rejoice to give merit in democracy a fairer chance to triumph. But the key words for me was a just society.
Yeah,
and just individuals.
We don't have a just society.
There we go.
But you know what, Dr. Ma'at? He has a just society because he's white. He's thinking, this society, a couple of white people.
Hold on. I didn't hear you, Brother Everett. You gotta repeat that to me. What happened?
I said he has a just society because he's white. I mean, he's thinking on a whole different level. He's not thinking from a Black person's standpoint. You saying all of these things that are holding us down, but you're expecting a just society to change things. Well,
individuals.
And that's another one. And just individuals. These people that are in power aren't just. You know what I'm saying? And they're not going to change anything for us. This isn't a society that's for us to come up. It's to benefit off of us. It's to benefit off our hard labor and keep us down and keep us, wanting and not wanting to give. So a great things he's saying, but his standpoint is a just society, just individuals, and those people aren't in power, and they're not going to change anything.
That's a fact. So look, without further ado, Brother Everett and I are going to announced a new book. We're finished with the hidden cost of being African American.
Great book.
This was a great book. It's a great book. So if you didn't read it with the book club, when you get it, read it and check out the book club discussions. I've created like a playlist on my YouTube channel that says like the R.E.A.D Book Club, and it has the title, Hidden Cost of Being African American. So check out the playlist. Also, Brother Everett and I, we've read Birth of a White Nation by Dr. Jacqueline Badalora. So it's a really short book, but it's powerful. I think it's only, was it like 70, 80 pages, something like that?
That was really, a lot of that dealt with this. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was a very powerful book. And so I created a playlist on my channel. So when you get an opportunity, grab the book and then listen to the discussions. But our next book is The Myth of Black Buying Power by Dr. Jared Ball. Okay, that is our next read, The Myth of Black Buying Power by Dr. Jared Ball. Now, I reached out to Dr. Ball. He's actually been on my platform before. He was on last year, and he told me that the publisher is offering a free download, like a PDF of it. So it's like a PDF online that you can grab, and I'll throw it in our book club chat on Facebook. So there's a PDF that you can grab online of his book, and he said the publisher is just a free PDF. But me personally,
I need that book.
Yeah, me personally, I'm not like a PDF reader. Like, I know that you can highlight in PDFs, but as you can see, I like to mark up books. I like to mark up and highlight and write along the margins. So I looked on Amazon, and I do see that his book is available on Amazon. It was like $47, but I was like, goodness, why is it so expensive? I know the book is only maybe like 142 pages, a really short read. And so, but I'm gonna go ahead and buy it because like I say, I like to mark up stuff, and you can see my bookshelf behind me. I'm a paperback woman. And so I like to sit in bed and mark things up. I know some people use Kindle and things of that nature, but I'm a paperback person. I don't know if I'm just old school or not, but they are not the only ones with matches. Amazon. Yeah. So that's the next book, family, The Myth of Black Buying Power by Dr. Jared Ball. So we will be going live in a couple of weeks to start reading that book. So please get your book as soon as possible. Brother Everett, do you have any closing words, brother?
This is just a powerful book. I learned so much. I actually was talking to my mother just in general about some stuff, because as an elder, she might have felt like she wished she could have left more. But just learning about living inheritance, I'm like, you providing a lot of living inheritance, providing for your grandkids, school supplies, helping out with bills and stuff like that. We'll take that. That's helping me out. So, it's a lot of stuff I learned from this book, and I'm just blessed to be a part of it. And I can't wait for the next read.
Absolutely. And so I don't have anything. Yeah, I'm with you. I share your same sentiments. Our elders did the best that they could with what they had, and they were operating with the knowledge. And that's all they can do is operate the best they can with the knowledge that they possess, So, like I said, she's great. You said this is your mother or grandmother?
My mom's. And she was talking about, she mentioned how her moms didn't have it. And she felt like she was doing better, but she like, man, I couldn't do this. So I went into financial things. So this happened or that happened, or you just don't know. And what was funny? She mentioned, I was telling her about the book, and she mentioned how when she was working, she would see her white co-workers talking about they took out stuff from oil stocks and stuff to pay down payments. I was like, wow, I was talking about the book, and that's how we got into it. And I was like, I just read stuff like that. And I just let her know, living inheritance. You can still do things while you're here to help out. Right. And we just need to, and I just need to take it to the next level, And
absolutely.
So that's what I got out of this book.
Absolutely. And Sister Crystal Denise, she said, yes, it was a great book. She said, eye-opening. We'll be adding to our curriculum based on some topics addressed. Ashe. Wow. Ashe. So I'm looking forward to the next read, The Myth of Black Buying Power, because you hear a lot of Black folks, we spend $1.2 trillion a year. And Dr. Jared Ball, he said, man, that's, you all are reading the wrong stuff.
That's right.
He said it's a myth, the myth of Black buying power. So, us running around here with that notion that we spend $1.2 trillion per year, you would look at that would make someone question our values, right? It would say, right, okay, if you all are spending $1.2 trillion a year, why don't you have Black communities? Why don't you have land? Why don't you own houses? Why don't you own schools or, institutions? Why aren't you building if you're spending $1.2 trillion, right? You start questioning people's values, and so Dr. Jared Ball said that's a myth. And so we're going to unpack that myth. All right, family. So let me see. Sister Beautiful Mind said, this is a beautiful platform. Always a deep build. Ashe. And Brother Africa the Great said, getting the book now. Love from the Black man's Ashe. All right, family. So we'll be back on. I'll probably bring on Shapiro next week just to talk about this book. But in the meantime, in the next couple of weeks, get the Myth of Black Buying Power, because we're going to be ready to rock and roll in about 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. All right, family. My cousin said, great conversation. Great conversation needed this. Ashe. All right, family. Peace and Black power.